Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. And let's talk, obviously, about Fight for the Fallen. Let's talk about AEW. And let's talk about CM Punk. Yes, last night there was plenty, absolutely plenty of CM Punk references during last night's AEW Dynamite Fight for the Fallen special on TNT. Now, obviously, this comes after the news last week that was reported by Fightful that CM Punk was in negotiations to make an in-ring return to professional wrestling. It was subsequently reported that AEW was the most likely landing place for CM Punk going forward in professional wrestling. And there have been rumors, of course, over the last week or so that CM Punk has already signed for AEW. There's hope for him to attend the Chicago shows during All Out Week, Dynamite, Rampage, and All Out. But last night, it wasn't official confirmation that CM Punk has signed with AEW by any stretch of the imagination, but this was as close as AEW putting the CM Punk is All Elite graphic on their Twitter. CM Punk, for me, now it's no question. He signed with AEW because there was so many references to Punk last night, some subtle, some not so subtle. CM Punk signed with AEW. There's no doubt in my mind. Now, obviously, the biggest was the Darby Allin promo, and we'll touch on that in a second. But last night's AEW Dynamite Fight for the Fallen featured a couple of CM Punk references throughout the show. As noted previously, it was reported that Punk was in talks to coming into AEW. Now, AEW, we'll touch on this in a second, is headed to the United Center in Chicago on August 20 for the AEW Rampage First Dance show. This is going to be the second Rampage broadcast after their debut in Pittsburgh on Friday, August the 13th. Now, the announcement regarding Rampage, the First Dance, which of course AEW trademarked last week, and Punk actually played the theme from the last dance on his Instagram story last week as well, led to loud CM Punk chants from the crowd in attendance last night for Fight to the Fallen. Now, right after that, and this is what you can see on the screen right now, right after that, Darby Allin had a promo backstage with Alex Marvez along with Sting, who stood there being Silent Sting. And Darby Allin had this to say, referencing CM Punk's former best in the world catchphrase and moniker throughout his WWE career. He said, quote, "I'll be in Chicago. You know, I've been around a lot of men in this world that have laid claim to how they're the greatest. There is only one place to really prove that, right here in AEW. Even if you think you are the best in the world," which led to a huge reaction from the crowd in attendance. Obviously, loud CM Punk chants. This has led to a lot of people saying, oh, are we going to get Darby Allin versus CM Punk in Punk's first match in AEW? I think right now that answer has to be yes. I think that answer has to be yes. When that happens, I think it probably happens All Out now. Again, we're going to touch on the Rampage announcement in a second, but given the Rampage announcement, it looks like Punk's debut is, 3 weeks away? 4 weeks away? It's not that long to wait now. That show, Rampage in Chicago, United Center, the first dance, Punk playing the last dance theme on his Instagram story, it's all heading in that direction. It's all moving towards there. That's where I think we're going. And it looks like Darby Allin's going to be Punk's first opponent, which I think is a great first opponent. What a position. What a position for Darby Allin. If you had any doubts about how highly AEW views Darby Allin, which you shouldn't because the guy has been booked to perfection, I think, in AEW, former TNT champion, former, he's got Sting as his mentor, all that kind of stuff. He's got all this great work that's going on right now with Darby Allin. And, since day one, he's been booked incredibly strong in AEW. To have the faith and the confidence that you're going to be the guy after 7 years out of the ring, nearly a decade out of the ring, CM Punk's first match is going to be against Darby Allin. That's a massive, massive spot for Darby Allin, a huge spot. And I think it's justified. Darby Allin versus CM Punk, these are the kind of matches that people were excited about seeing Punk square off against in AEW. The excitement wasn't there from himself, let alone the AEW fans. The excitement just wasn't there to see Punk go up against Chris Jericho or Cody Rhodes or the names he faced off against in WWE. Punk said that himself, AEW seems a more interesting proposition to myself because a lot of the guys on the WWE roster, even though I've been gone for nearly a decade, I still faced off before, and I want to do something new. I want to do something unique if I come back, and you don't get much newer and more unique than Darby Allin. So I think that's an excellent, excellent first opponent for Punk. Obviously, it means Darby Allin's losing to CM Punk because CM Punk isn't having his first match back inside of a pro wrestling ring in 7 years, nearly a decade, and he's not losing. Even though it might be good for business, maybe, to put over Darby Allin and establish him as a future star. Punk isn't losing that match because he's going to be wrestling, I don't know how much of a regular basis, but he's certainly going to be having several matches for AEW, so it doesn't make any sense for him to lose to Darby Allin in his first match. But it's a big match. It's certainly a match to sell all out on, and I think people will purchase the pay-per-view, buy tickets to watch that match specifically. But it wasn't the only CM Punk reference we got last night at Fight for the Fallen. In the opening match of the show between the Elite and Hangman Page and the Dark Order, Nick Jackson pulled off one of Punk's signature moves, the high knee into the corner into a bulldog. And finally, after Chris Jericho defeated Nick Gage in the No Rules match main event to pass the second chapter of MJF's The Labors of Jericho, MJF quickly got on the mic. He was announcing Jericho's next labor next week. We'll touch on that later on in the video. And this reference to Punk was a little bit more subtle, but I think people kind of got it. This is what MJF had to say. He said, quote, "Chris, as you sit there in more pain than you've ever been in your entire life, I want you to listen to me." Now, you would say, well, how is that a reference to CM Punk? Well, of course, that is a reference, a bit more of a subtle one, but it's a reference to the pipe bomb promo that CM Punk did to John Cena in Las Vegas on that infamous episode of Monday Night Raw in 2011. Punk started off his promo by saying, quote, "John Cena, while you lay there, hopefully as uncomfortable as you possibly can be, I want you to listen to me." So MJF was doing a subtle reference to Punk. Either way, we're getting a lot of Punk references. Again, last night for me, unless they do CM Punk is All Elite, that graphic on the screen, that was as good as we're going to get. Punk is coming to AEW. I don't know if he's officially signed. I would think they wouldn't do all of this stuff on television just for him not to have signed yet. So I think he's signed. I know some people still are in the camp of, I'll believe it when I see it. We'll wait and see. I don't know. We've heard this before. All that kind of stuff. Maybe AEW is just trolling on us. Maybe AEW has seen all of the news on social media and they're just trying to play that up and they're trying to go in that direction and all that kind of stuff. It's a big swerve. If AEW did that, for me, I think they would run the risk of losing some fans that have got a vested interest in them. I do. I think AEW has made a relationship with their audience that they don't really lie to the audience. They don't really tease stuff that doesn't end up happening. I know people were very upset with the Christian Cage reveal, right? At Revolution. It's a Hall of Fame worthy signing, which it was, but people got their hopes up and they felt that AEW underdelivered that. And some AEW fans soured on them for that. So times that by 1 million. Realistically, times that by 1 million if that happens with Punk. So I really don't think AEW would go down that route of we're going to tease Punk and not deliver, because you have to, especially when you've got 4 big events coming up in Chicago. You've got that Rampage show, then you've got Dynamite, another Rampage show, then All Out. It would be so silly for them to do that, and I don't think they will. I don't think they're willing to risk jeopardizing that relationship with their audience. I don't think they will. So I think last night, all of those hints were as good as we're going to get that CM Punk has indeed signed with AEW. And like I mentioned, Darby Allin, a great first opponent for Punk, and I'm excited to see that. I think that happens at All Out now. Now, we touched on this a second ago, but AEW did announce last night that Rampage, the first dance, will be coming to the United Center in Chicago. Last night during Dynamite Fight for the Fallen, Tony Schiavone, it was originally scheduled to be Tony Khan, but he just didn't in the end. It was Tony Schiavone instead, announced that AEW is headed to the United Center in Chicago on August 20 for AEW Rampage First Dance. Tickets go on sale Monday, August 2nd. The announcement led to, of course, loud CM Punk chants from the crowd. Now, as previously mentioned here, AEW filed to trademark The First Dance, which of course is a play on the Last Dance documentary on Michael Jordan and the famous 1990 Chicago Bulls. Punk, of course, took to Instagram to post the song Sirius by the Alan Parsons Project, which of course was the entrance song to the 90s Bulls, leading to speculation that the First Dance trademark is related to him. It must be worth saying as well, actually, here, I think this is important to state too, that these special episodes of Dynamite, wherever it's Winter is Coming was referring to Sting's debut, because of course you have the snow come out every time Sting comes out. So the First Dance, I think, is a reference to Punk. I think obviously Punk's teased it and all that kind of stuff. So the interesting thing, of course, is that AEW's hitting the Chicago market so soon to when they're going to be hitting the market again for Dynamite, Rampage, and All Out at the end of August into September. I mean, this is what? The August 20th edition of Rampage is like, I don't know, 2 weeks? 2 weeks away from All Out. So they're going to go to Chicago, go away, and then come back. I know some people have said, is that going to affect things? Are people worried about that? Are AEW worried about that? I don't think so. I don't think AEW would be particularly worried about that, to be honest with you. I think AEW would just look at that to say that CM Punk making his pro wrestling return not even officially announced, but hinted at, is enough for people to buy tickets for Rampage. And it's not going to affect things for Dynamite, Rampage, and All Out that entire week, because that's become a bit of a destination event anyway. People will fly in from all over the country for those Dynamite, Rampage, and All Out shows. So I don't think them doing a Rampage show so soon to that big All Out week in Chicago, I don't think that will negatively affect things anyway. The United Center is a great arena. WWE, I think the first event in the United Center was SummerSlam in, 1994? Something like that, I think. I mean, I might be wrong, but I think that was the case. And for whatever reason, they just don't really hit it anymore. And I don't know why. We've seen these reports that AEW is very keen on having Chicago truly be their second big market. I would assume their first big one, that would be the home market of Jacksonville in Florida. But they're keen on having their home away from home being Chicago. And that's why you've got all of those events in the Now Arena for Dynamite, Rampage, and All Out. I wouldn't be surprised if next year, that whole week of All Out, when it comes to Dynamite, Rampage, and All Out, I wouldn't be surprised if that's just moved to the United Center. Of course, it's the bigger arena. I don't know. I think it holds something like, 20,000 something? I don't know if you're going to get 20,000 in there for Rampage. The time will tell when it comes to that one. If they do, it'll be incredibly impressive. I think most likely you might be looking at 10, 12, maybe even 14, something like that, but probably 10 they might go for. But again, it depends. It depends on the demand of having CM Punk make his debut at that event, which of course AEW isn't going to announce, I don't think. I'd be very surprised if they do. I think instead what they're going to do is what they did last night. They're going to announce it without announcing it. They're going to tease it. They're going to hint at it, because at the end of the day, they've still got to sell tickets. And there was that report that TNT was a bit unhappy with AEW and Tony Khan when Sting made his debut. They were like, you should have told us. We would have promoted it. And Tony Khan had to sort of go back and go, well, it doesn't really work like that in pro wrestling. So maybe this is the compromise that they've reached. Maybe it's the compromise of, we're not going to officially announce Punk's debut because we want to keep it a surprise, but we're going to do everything we can to subtly hint, you should probably buy a ticket, or you should probably tune in to Rampage on August 20th, because that's when Punk's going to make his debut. Now, of course, some people will also be saying, why would you do it then? Why wouldn't you do it on Dynamite? Why would you do it All Out? You've got to remember that this is a new property for AEW, and Rampage, look, the numbers weren't great for Dynamite in that Friday time slot. And they're hoping to combat that, and they're going to combat that by putting CM Punk in there. And the first Rampage show will probably do a half-decent number, you would think, because it's a debut of a new show. But after that, it's going to be tough. So they want to do a big number on the first week and a big number on the second week. Time will tell if Punk's enough for that. It's a difficult time slot, but it will certainly be very interesting to see. Very interesting to see that they're doing seemingly Punk's debut on that Rampage show, but looks like Punk's going to be wrestling at All Out, which is very exciting. Now, speaking of All Out, this is a really exciting story, because it looks like Jon Moxley could be facing Hiroshi Tanahashi, New Japan legend Hiroshi Tanahashi, at All Out. Now, during last night's Dynamite fight for the fallen New Japan Pro Wrestling star Hiroshi Tanahashi, via a video, issued a challenge for the IWGP United States Championship. Now, Tanahashi is now scheduled to take on Lance Archer at the New Japan Pro Wrestling Resurgence event at the LA Coliseum in Los Angeles on August 14. Now, later on in the night, Jon Moxley called out Tanahashi, ending his promo by saying, because the forbidden door might be open, but ain't nothing good waiting for y'all on the other side. Moxley noted that he has unfinished business in Japan too. Now, on the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer radio show, Dave Meltzer reported that Moxley had a recent conversation with AEW President Tony Khan about wanting to face, quote, a top New Japan superstar at All Out on September 5th, something which Khan agreed with, and it's possible that Tanahashi is indeed that star. Now, when Dave Meltzer is saying that Jon Moxley had a conversation with Tony Khan, that's the truth, because probably Dave Meltzer probably spoke to Tony Khan himself. They're very close. Now, Moxley, of course, is fresh off losing the IWGP United States Championship to Archer on Dynamite last week at Fyter Fest Night 2. He has been advertised for the Resurgence event, but as the IWGP United States Champion, so it's not confirmed whether Moxley's going to have a match on the show, an appearance. Time will only tell. However, it looks like Moxley may have another New Japan opponent in the future. Moxley did note in his promo that he had challenges going unanswered. So, I think, I think the reason it makes sense now that Moxley would drop the IWGP United States Championship, because I think we see a situation, possibly, where we have Lance Archer lose the IWGP United States Championship to Tanahashi at this Resurgence event. That then sets up Moxley versus Tanahashi at All Out. I think that's the direction they're going to go in. That's a big match for Moxley, who, of course, isn't involved in World Championship pictures, etc. at the moment. So already, this card is coming together. Really is for September in Chicago for All Out. You've got Punk versus Darby Allin. You've got Moxley versus Tanahashi. You've got Jericho once again against MJF. I still think we get Omega versus Page somehow, despite the loss last night. So what a card. I mean, realistically, what a card. And it's forbidden door with AEW and New Japan continues to be open. And you think of guys like Daniel Bryan, like CM Punk coming in. It opens the door for Tanahashi versus Bryan, Tanahashi versus Punk, Punk versus Okada, Bryan versus Okada, Jay White getting involved there as well. I mean, it's just incredibly exciting, and it's once again this budding relationship between AEW and New Japan continues to get stronger. Considering this time last year, maybe that wasn't going to be the case. There was a lot of heat there from Cody and the Bucks, and particularly Kenny Omega going over and forming All Elite Wrestling. There was a lot of heat there, but reportedly now that looks to have changed. And Tanahashi versus Moxley at All Out in September, that's a big deal for AEW and New Japan too. Now, last night on Fight for the Fallen, the main event was, of course, Nick Gage's AEW Dynamite in-ring debut as Chris Jericho continued his 5 labors of Jericho. He defeated Gage in a no-rules match in the main event. Jericho passed 2 of 5 as he looks to have a future match with MJF. For Gage, of course, this was his AEW in-ring debut. Now, the match, as you would expect, was unbelievably violent. I think, to be honest, in terms of GCW stuff, it might be slightly toned down, but you still had the staples of a, pun intended, the staples of a Nick Gage match. You had the light tubes, you had the pizza cutters, you had the glass, all that kind of stuff. Near the end of the match, Chris Jericho sprayed mist into Gage's eyes, cracked him over the head with a bunch of light tubes, and then dropped Gage with a Judas Effect for the pinfall victory. After the match, of course, MJF announced that the third labor of Jericho would be Jericho facing off against one of his former rivals that he faced many times on TNT, that being former WCW star Juventud Guerrera. And actually, Jericho made a reference to the Juice during an episode of Dynamite last year where he had, or was it 2019, when he had a confrontation with MJF. So that was nice that they played that one back. As far as the match with Jericho and Gage last night, I know for a fact, people will be watching that being horrified, absolutely horrified. I questioned going into it, are they really going to do a Nick Gage match on TNT? They did exactly that. They did exactly that. They did a Nick Gage match on TNT in the main event. It's not my thing. I'll be telling you, it's not my thing, and I do kind of cringe a bit because and I suppose that's the reaction you want of, the light tubes over the head and the smashing of the light tubes and just literally stabbing them in the head of Jericho is crazy. For Nick Gage, I have nothing but praise for Nick Gage, though, to be honest with you. This is a guy that, of all of the struggles in his life, obviously, but he's done pro wrestling his way, and somehow, some way, he's made a name for himself. You can't argue with that. Realistically, you can't. Again, this is deathmatch wrestling that they used to do in fields because they didn't want to get the cops called. And the guy nearly died because he got stabbed in, the side of his body with that light tubes that you saw on Dark Side of the Ring and the Tournament of Death, whatever it was called. And he's done it his way, and by doing it his way, he main evented a pro wrestling show on TNT last night in front of easily the largest crowd he's ever performed in front of. You have to give him credit. How can you not give him credit for that? It's an incredible story. Now, is it my kind of thing? No. I am stunned, and I will give major credit to Chris Jericho for taking some of the stuff he was taking. Chris Jericho's like 50, and he was going through glass, taking light tubes to the head, getting stabbed in the head, a pizza cutter in the head. That is nuts. That is absolutely insane. Jericho's like that, though. Jericho's like that, especially in his later years. He did it with the thumbtacks and Moxley and WWE. That he's not against it. He's a madman, an absolute madman, but he's not against it. So I give major credit to Jericho for taking the punishment he did last night. I'll give credit to Nick Gage as well. Like I said, he did it his way. He's now... He main evented Dynamite on TNT in front of a capacity crowd of however many was there. Was it 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 people? That's insane. And he did it his way. He didn't have to conform and do it, another way. That you have to give him credit for that. Does he necessarily belong in a Dynamite main event? I'm not sure about that, but look, credit to him and credit to Chris Jericho. You can't argue that. And Jericho versus Hoovy next week. That's interesting. That's a really interesting one. Now, Fight for the Fallen opened with the match between Hangman and the Dark Order against the Elite in that 10-man elimination tag team match. Of course, the stipulation was if Hangman won, or Hangman and the Dark Order won, they would get opportunities at the AEW World Championship and the Tag Team Championship. If they lost, they wouldn't get any opportunities ever again. Well, I did mention in yesterday's video, I could see a situation where Hangman doesn't win and they go a different route to having Hangman versus Kenny at All Out. What that route is, I don't know, but that's exactly what happened. The stipulation, as I mentioned, was that if Page and the Dark Order won, they would receive future title shots against Omega and the Bucks. If they lost, they could not challenge for either title. The Elite ended up winning the match, with Omega lastly pinning Page after hitting the one-winged angel. I thought the entrance by Page and the Dark Order was amazing. I think in terms of production, I mean, AEW's got pretty good production, probably not at the level of WWE production, but the production of AEW is very good. I think it's arguably one of the best produced things they've done. I thought that entrance was spectacular. It really was spectacular. Whoever came up with that, they deserve a raise. It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant by Page and the Bucks. Page and Dark Order, rather. And the entrance after that of the Elite, it was a tie-in to Space Jam 2 because TNT, Warner Media, Warner Brothers, etc. So they came out to the whole Space Jam theme, and the Elite were in basketball gears, and there was a hoop at ringside. Don Callis came out in shorts, and it was horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. It did make me laugh, but I did kind of look at that being like, if it's a big match, you just had this great entrance, and you kind of have the Elite coming out being goofy, and it was comedy, and I was a bit like, I don't know if I would have gone with that kind of theme, but I suppose the argument could be made, well, they're heels, and they got heat and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I know some people were complaining a bit about the outcome. Look, the crowd was into it. I still think Page challenges Omega for the championship at All Out. I just think they go another direction to get there. How they get there, I don't know, but I think that's the direction that they're going in. Now, there was an injury to Cash Wheeler last night during the match between FTR and Santana and Ortiz. It must be said, I was really excited about this one, and I didn't think it was that good. I think it was slightly disappointing. So essentially what happened was Cash Wheeler injured his arm during the tag team match on last night's edition of Dynamite. Now, in an update, PW Insider has reported that Wheeler suffered a really bad cut to his arm. You can see it there. And was immediately treated by AEW medical staff. The report added that Wheeler was said to be okay backstage, and there's no word yet on if he's going to miss any ring time. It was noted that Wheeler's injury was a completely freak thing. He was up on the turnbuckle, he came down, and I think he just caught his arm on the metal between the turnbuckle and the ring post, it looked like. The incident occurred when FTR was attempting a superplex splash combination, with Wheeler attempting the splash. Santana broke up the spot by sending Wheeler off the top to the floor. The match was ended very abruptly a few minutes later after Wheeler's partner, Dax Howard, got the pin, a clean pin on Ortiz following the brainbuster. I don't think that was the initial planned finish. It looked like they called an audible. The crowd was very flat for it and a bit confused. Obviously, the injury didn't help, but I think just in general, the match was a bit flat, which is a bit disappointing. I still think they probably end up in a situation where they have another match at All Out. That can be a number one contenders match, and the winner of that match faces the Bucks at Arthur Ashe Stadium in the Grand Slam edition of Dynamite in September. I think the winner of that match will be Santana and Ortiz. That's when they'll win the World Tag Team Championships in their hometown of New York City. I think that's the destination that they're going in, but hopefully Cash Wheeler doesn't miss any injury time. You can see it there. Initially, there was concern that the bone was poking out of his arm. I don't think that's the case. I think that might be tape or something like that. But man, it was nasty. It was really, really nasty and didn't look good for a second there. Finally, pro wrestling legend David Crockett attended this week's AEW Dynamite tapings in North Carolina, and he will be a guest commentator for next week's Dark Elevation. Now, Crockett, as you're probably aware, did appear in front of the crowd prior to Dynamite and joined Tony Schiavone and Paul White, the commentary team for Elevation. Schiavone and Crockett, of course, were the announce team for World Championship Wrestling, the flagship show for Jim Crockett Promotions, and later WCW between 1985 through 1988. Jim Ross then joined the team in 1988 too. Crockett left shortly after Crockett Promotions was sold to Turner Broadcasting, but remained with WCW as an executive producer. So great to see David Crockett back. I'm very interested to see what that's going to look like and most importantly sound like next week. So very exciting and great to see David Crockett back. But look guys, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these AEW news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about AEW, WWE, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, got the rankings, and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right-hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.